we have some exciting new information coming forth from AEP Connections, our partners. So if you are looking to learn more about executive function supports in a creative, hands-on way, AEP Connections has a brand new course designed by Sarah Ward, and it's a spin on a make and take course that will occur over 4 sessions, providing feedback and answer questions that you come up with as you implement strategies in real time. They also have 2 dyslexia courses forthcoming, and that will be a live focus on assessment and co-occurring needs and share some of the best practices on how to support dyslexic students. Another course will be an on-demand course where you will learn what you learned in the first course and dive into strategies. There's also a course on PDA, which is also known as pathological demand avoidance, or as some people say, persistent demand for autonomy. It's a follow-up on supporting PDAs using a declarative language approach. So that's a little bit about the lineup for the fall. Again, you can have more information on this at aepconnections.com. We also will include the link on the page for this episode. So please check into these great courses and also check into the continuing education credits you can get through so many organizations.
The primary purpose of Uniquely Human, the podcast, is to educate and inform. The views expressed during all episodes are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute educational or medical advice. Listeners should consult with professionals familiar with each individual or family for specific guidance.
Uniquely Human, the podcast, is produced by Elevated Studio. Music is graciously provided by Matt Savage of Savage Records.
Hi, I'm Dr. Barry Prezant, clinical scholar, researcher, and consultant on autism and neurodiversity, and a Brooklyn boy raised in the big city.
And I'm Dave. I'm none of those things, and I grew up on a farm in Illinois. But being on the spectrum myself, I have plenty of personal insight to lend.
And this is Uniquely Human, the podcast, a show that illuminates and celebrates autism and neurodiversity. Today on Uniquely Human, the podcast, we're going to explore some very, very important issues about highly sensitive people and children with Dr. Judith Orloff. So welcome, Judith.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Pleasure to have you. Little bit about Judith. Dr. Judith Orloff is a psychiatrist, an empath, and a New York Times best-selling author who is a champion of highly sensitive children and adults. She is also on the UCLA Department of Psychiatry clinical faculty. Dr. Orloff is the author of The Genius of Empathy, The Empaths Survival Guide, and her new children's book, The Highly Sensitive Rabbit, which helps sensitive kids embrace their empathic gifts as a strength. And it is not only a beautifully written book, but a beautifully illustrated book, and we're going to dive into that as part of our discussion. Dr. Orloff's work has been featured on The Today Show, CNN, Oprah Magazine, the New York Times, and USA Today. And her simple but powerful message is, listen to your patients and listen to the people you support. Very, very important. So Judith, we always like to ask our guests just to share a little bit about their personal and professional journey, how you became involved in your current work, focusing on highly sensitive people and children and the empath movement.
As well, I'm a psychiatrist and an empath, and I combine both my traditional psychiatric skills with empathy and intuition and spirituality, and just including it all in the treatment of patients and also in my life. But when I was a little girl, I was shamed for my sensitivities, and I was told, you're overly sensitive, you're too sensitive, you need to get a thicker skin, you'll never fit in the world, you basically have to change. And that's very shocking to a young girl. How do you change? You are the way you are. But I wasn't given any support for it. And I had loving parents. They just were afraid I wouldn't fit in. And they had this idea that I would be considered weird, and they couldn't tolerate that you're weird. And, it had a big charge for them. So I grew up without any support, and it took getting mentors and meeting people and being in therapy myself, and to embrace my empathic abilities and my intuitions, and the part of me that is the road less traveled. I've never been the person on the main road. I've always been the person on the road less traveled, which is just fine with me. I feel more comfortable there. So, but they didn't see it that way. And so I grew up believing there was something wrong with me. And I wanted to write this highly sensitive rabbit book to help sensitive children know there is nothing wrong with them. As I went through it personally, and it's a gift, and it has challenges, and you need to learn how to deal with the challenges, such as setting boundaries, taking alone time, being able to say when you want to be with people or not be with people, and to be able to, assert your needs more. But in any case, that's just a capsule of my childhood and why I wanted to write this particular children's book.
So I have a question about that. Just we haven't met yet, so I'm all questions. When you were growing up, how did that manifest, or how did that look for you? When you say you were highly sensitive, you needed to get a thicker skin. I was always told the same thing. I could not handle teasing, and being a guy, and all my friends were guys. Everybody, the basis of all relationships was, hey, we are going to bust chops, right? And it would make me infuriated and jeopardize friendships, relationships. So in your case, how did that show up for you in, when you would get home from school or when you were at school?
Well, I would get overwhelmed a lot by emotions or too much activity, or if too much was coming at me too fast. And so I would have to be alone a lot. And so I'd want to go into my room and close the door, as that was the way I brought it all down. Or I wanted to be in nature. I loved walking in nature because that calmed me down. But I noticed that my friends didn't get thrown off in the same way that I did. And I couldn't walk into shopping malls or crowded places without changing somehow, where I walked in feeling okay, and then I walked out with some ache or pain I didn't have before, or feeling anxious, or feeling depressed, or just feeling discombobulated. So I didn't know. I would ask my parents what's happening, and they said, you just don't have a thick enough skin, as opposed to the real answer is, you're sensitive. When you go in crowded places, there are lots of people with lots of different energies, and you're receptive to that, and you may tend to take it on. And this is what you do when you take it on. This is how you don't take it on. This is not good to take on everybody's stress, obviously, but you do that as a child. It's just a natural kind of absorptive function that happens if you're highly sensitive.
So I'm putting myself in the minds of our listeners right now, because obviously most of our listeners who are parents, who are professionals, who are neurodivergent themselves are saying, wait a second, there seems to be a lot of overlap with what we've experienced. And it's not uncommon for all the guests that we've had for them to give similar descriptions of what you experienced as well. So I guess the natural question is, how do you distinguish between being an empath and neurodivergent, or is it a distinction that's worth even digging into? I'm thinking about a Venn diagram here, with overlap.
Yeah, I've never been that into labels. And so, I try not to do that. I think people have their individual experiences of the world, and you need to just honor what people are experiencing. And yes, I think there's an overlap between neurodivergent and highly sensitive. And, they might be a little of this or a little more of that, but it's all good, and it all has its particular challenges, though, of being highly sensitive, where you have to learn how to set boundaries. You have to learn how not to absorb. that's distress of other people. And you have to learn how to bring yourself down and neuroregulate, when you get overwhelmed. So no matter what your label is, you have to learn how to do those things. And we have that in common. And so it's good to have friends who also have similar issues, so you can have something in common with them. And I have a lot of empath friends, and I like having empath friends. I like having non-empath friends too. So it's just different. It's just honoring where each individual is at and not generalizing. That's a big thing, because one of my pet peeves, growing up as highly sensitive, people and doctors would say this to me when I go into doctors' offices, that you are the only one who's ever experienced this, and it's a way of putting your experience down. Like, so what? If I'm the only one, I experience it. This is what's happening to me. And so just if everyone's listening and that's been said to you, just realize you're not alone. It's an ignorant comment. They don't know, it's not malicious. It's just
it is ignorant. It's dismissive. Yeah. And my wife is an empath 1,000%, and we're 48 now, and she has spent essentially her entire adult life learning techniques to put up sort of energetic boundaries so she doesn't get sucked into someone else's energy.
Yes, that's very important. And there are all kinds of boundaries that one can learn. But the ability to say, no, I'm so sorry, I can't do that right now, is an important one. To learn how to say a positive no, not a negative no, not a punishing no, not a frightened no, but just, I'm so sorry, I can't do that right now. I need to go home and, get quiet, and people are disappointed. This is what empaths, and you have to get used to that. It's part of maturity. Emotional maturity and emotional intelligence. And sometimes you're going to disappoint people, and you have to accept that. When you, like in The Highly Sensitive Rabbit, that was an issue for Aurora, who was the heroine, the highly sensitive rabbit heroine. And she had to learn how to say, no, I can't do this now. I don't want to play with my brothers who are rough and tumble and making a lot of noise. I want to go off by myself, or I want to go with my friend, the javelina, who's a wild boar in the Sonoran Desert, in case you didn't know. Those are the characters in this book. They're all animals, they're not people, because I didn't want to write about people for this book. I write about people in all my other books.
Yeah.
So I write a book on animals. But to go off with your friend who's considered maybe different, and just go off and walk, maybe not even talk, just look around. You don't have to talk so much. That's what I think. A lot of sensitive people, they like being quiet. They like reading. They like walking in the woods. They like looking at the birds. They like, discovering things in nature. They like certain music. They don't like video games, so don't make them do video games. It's horrible for them. It's too overstimulating. The lights, the sounds, it's too much. But you see, that's the point, is there's nothing wrong with you if it's too much. It's just a preference. It's your sensory abilities. Some people don't feel anything. They have, lights and sounds coming at them, and they're like rocks. They don't have the sensory interactions or the absorptive tendencies. They don't. And that's fine. They're a different temperament. This is what we're talking about now, because, your listeners, your audience, can relate to this. And so can we all, just relate to it without saying much, because we all know what this experience is.
And relate to this in 1,000 different ways, everything from the sensory sensitivities to the overwhelm, and when what we refer to as the social complexity just gets too dense and
that's well put,
and too challenging. So I'm just curious, you kind of alluded to this in your personal journey, but especially for parents who are out there, what are some of the characteristics that you observe in very, very young children? And I know your goal is to depathologize or not pathologize at all. So helping parents to say, well, wait a second, there's a continuum of humanity here. But if they see characteristics, what might they see in their young kids that might lead them to believe that, okay, my child is an empath?
They like their alone time. And they have their animals. They love their stuffed animals. They love their imaginary friends. And don't get upset if they have imaginary friends, if they're talking to people, it's, having these secret relationships that are loving. And they get overwhelmed, and they tend to tantrum when they're overwhelmed if they're not given what they need. And so what I think parents need to recognize with their kids is that they're tantruming because they're on sensory overload. So at that moment, so it doesn't gather momentum, you want to put them in their room, someplace they love, and give them what they need to calm down, turn down the lights, turn down the sound level, and just let them come back to themselves. And that's fine. Just do that. And you can do that too. You might be a highly sensitive parent, because I treat a lot of highly sensitive parents in my practice. And you have to learn how to honor your sensitivities as well, because having children is a big deal, and it takes a lot out of you. And if they're tantruming or screaming, which they do, they have this high-pitched scream that goes right through you, because they're biologically, I assume, it's so that you will respond emergently. They know how to hit that note. So you have to learn how to deal with that, and to be able to take the time for you to equilibrate and neuroregulate yourself. And not, when you notice that you're getting overwhelmed, to do something about it. Take some time to reboot, because you don't want to keep doing that activity if you're going on overwhelm too, as it'll just snowball, and then the two of you will collide, and that's not healthy. That's not good. So you taking time out, if you have someone who's helping you, that's really useful, to give your child to them if the child's really little, just for a few minutes. I mean, even just go in the bathroom. I know that that's not a perfect solution either, because one of my empath mothers and the empath children, she would go in the bathroom, but there'd be a space under the door, and she'd see the little fingers coming in as she was trying
like the call is coming from inside the house.
Right. So you do the best you can, and you keep breathing through it. One of the techniques that I teach Aurora, or that Aurora learns from the animals in the Sonoran Desert, because it takes place in the desert, which I'm so proud of, because it's an unusual environment for a children's book. Usually they're in the forest, because forests are magical. But I wanted to introduce children to a different environment that has a different kind of magic, which is the desert. It has so many magical animals and light and, space. And it is just, anyways, the Aurora learns from all the different desert animals, who said, well, when I get overwhelmed, I do this. I take some time out, take some alone time, or I find somebody I like to talk to. This works for me. And then Aurora would try it, and it worked for her. And it was just communicating with birds. The birds and the javelinas and the skunks are all her teachers, which I love.
I have to say that I'm developing a very different sense of a javelina, because I went horseback riding in a ranch in Arizona. My wife is a horse person, and I'm not a horse person. So I go on kind of like, okay, I can do this because Elaine wants to do this. And a javelina spooked my horse.
Oh.
And my horse reared back, and I held on. And anyway, well, one thing that's so magical about the book is how all the wonderful desert creatures come up with different ideas for Aurora. Just showing that there are many possibilities that you could draw from to help you when you're feeling challenged in those instances.
That's right. And the children need to know those very simple possibilities, such as just take a breath, honey. Take a breath. That's what you do when you start to feel, too much is coming at you, very simple things. And so, I wanted Aurora to learn from different animals in different shapes, different sizes, commonality of the respect and love that they had for each other. And you could teach each other. People who are going through similar experiences can be very helpful for being friends and talking it out and understanding, as opposed to somebody looking at you like, what? Which can happen. And not everyone will understand you. I want to make that point. And they just won't.
And they're under no obligation to. So that's why we can't take it personally. And not taking things personally is something that I still work on with very little success.
It's hard, but sometimes people's limitations stop them. It's not a bad heart. It's not malice, but their limitations, they can't grasp certain things. Like if you see the color green and somebody doesn't have that ability to see the color green, they're never going to see it, and it's just the way they were made. But there are other people who see the color green who you can, get excited about green with.
Yeah. And, what's so interesting about this, too, to me, is that highly sensitive children become highly sensitive adults. It's not like your birthday gift when you turn 18 is the universe just says, okay, now you're not sensitive to, you're empathic, but you're not, it doesn't affect you in a way like you're protected. That just doesn't happen. And everything you're describing to me, like the way that we would intervene and give our child some quiet time. I mean, Kristen and I have done this with both of our children. One probably more than the other, who continues to be very sensitive. But now I'm seeing that I need the exact same things. In a typical work day in a corporate environment, you're getting inundated, and at any point, I feel like I could snap and lash out. The consequences of that are dire. You lose your house, all that stuff. So, I'm finding my own ways to stay regulated now too, which very much mirror what we used to do for our kiddos when they were in elementary school and junior high and high school.
That's right. And that's what's beautiful about it, is that we can, all use these techniques and put them into action in corporate environments, and to pause when agitated. That's very important, because if you're in a corporate environment and you're about to blow, there's a lot at stake,
Yes.
So if anything, even if you don't know how to handle a situation, just pause when agitated. Just excuse yourself, go to the bathroom, just do something so you don't say something you regret or send that email that you can't take back.
Judith, I love what you say, that your book is for children 4 to 8 years of age and people of any age who have a sensitive inner child that wants to be honored and to be loved. So I do want to ask you this. We were talking about the challenges of being a highly sensitive person or child. What are some of the gifts that go along with that?
Intuition, caring, empathy for our fellow humans, caring about the earth, knowing that it's our job to take care of the earth, learning how to help people, and as they grow up, being attracted to the helping professions or something earth related, that they want to help improve the situation in general. A lot of them want to do this. They want to be helpful. And they're very open to other people, and they're very loving. Like I had my partner's son is on the spectrum, grandson is on the spectrum, and he came over, and my friend was sitting in the couch, and she had a hurt hand, and he just walked over. He's so cute, walked over, and he just took her hand up and went, hurt? He was really good then. And then she was like, oh my God, he's so empathic. It was so kind. It was just so kind that he even noticed. It wasn't a huge injury, but he noticed that there was something wrong, and he wanted to just connect. And I'll never forget that. That seemed like such a beautiful thing to do, and not that children don't do that at times, but it was just, I witnessed it in him, and it was just beautiful.
And of course, that's one of the myths that has been shattered, we hope, about children or people who have a diagnostic label of autism or who identify as autistic. You know, that lack of empathy myth has gone on for so long, and very often what we actually see is the reverse, as you just described it.
Right, right. I wrote a book called The Genius of Empathy, which is how to connect with empathy in your lives. And I had the honor of interviewing Temple Grandin for that book. And we were talking about the whole empathy question, and she was describing, her empathy. And she said her empathy is action oriented. When she sees somebody in trouble or an animal in trouble, she really relates to animals. She wants to kick into action and do something. That's how her empathy manifests as action. And so it's not just feeling for the animal or feeling, it's taking action to help, and how she automatically goes into that. And I found that really interesting, because I think each person has their own way of showing empathy. And it's important, to just, again, see everyone as individuals, see how they naturally cope with things and how the empathy manifests, because there are different kinds of empathy.
So I'm just curious, and this question kind of is more clinically oriented in a sense. I know there are many listeners out there who are saying, well, this describes my child, or this describes me. How important is it for me to try to get a clinical diagnosis now? Since being a highly sensitive person or an empath is not a clinical diagnosis, and in the world that we live in, very often that's what leads to funding for services. So I know Dave and I fully agree with what you're saying. What matters the most is each individual person and each person's experience. But do you wish to comment on that piece, since there's such obvious overlap in the experiences of people who are empaths and people who have neurodivergent labels or maybe not yet diagnosed?
Well, it depends on what your goal is. It's important to know, to find a healthcare system, if you do want to have a diagnosis and help from the system in that way, to find a health system that is supportive of all this, and to find out where they're coming from, because a lot of health systems aren't supportive, and it could just make things worse because they have different views, they have limited views, and they don't even believe an empath exists. So this is just true for strictly empaths. If they don't go to a practitioner who knows about energy and knows about empaths, and I have a 20-question self-assessment test that empaths can take in the Empath Survival Guide. If they don't have that or something like that to diagnose someone as an empath, empaths are notoriously misdiagnosed. So it's generalized anxiety disorder, as depression, and all kinds of things. So they're given meds, and of course they only partially work or don't work. And you want to go to a system where they understand empaths, and it's more and more possible, but you have to ask, if they have that perspective. And if a clinical setting is not known for accepting empaths, or allowing for the individuality of each human being, then I wouldn't go there. It depends. If you need a diagnosis, if you want to get in and hooked up with county programs or something like that, that's a little different. So it depends what your goal is in wanting the diagnosis.
What diagnosis would a family seek? And then I have a follow-up question based on the answer.
What diagnosis would a family seek? If a family was wanting to get a diagnosis of some sort that they could fit into the DSM, that would give benefits, or that would help with registering in programs, or, getting help in some way, that they would need a diagnosis to get in the system.
Okay, I gotcha. So there might be some creative problem solving to getting the diagnosis that closest matches the child or the individual situation. And then are you aware of, or do you have recommendations for maybe online therapists who conduct virtual via Zoom or something like this, or telephone? For instance, if there's a family in rural Kentucky and they don't have a health system that's accessible to them in person, have you found ways to avail yourself of services online that are reputable?
Well, there are some services online, like Elaine Aaron, who does research on highly sensitive children. She has trained a bunch of practitioners, through around the country. So I've had pretty good luck with referring to them. You might want to check out my website because I have some resources there, and some of them are online. And I've had pretty good luck, but it's not perfect. But you have to interview the person. You can't just go. You have to see if there's a connection, have a session, see if there's a connection, see if you're on the same wavelength. Because if you're not, it won't work anyways.
And most therapists these days who do online work, I believe, usually allow for a trial session or meeting so that you can feel, is this the right fit for me? Does this feel that this is a supportive person? Yeah.
Hopefully. Yeah, hopefully. You have to go person by person, and you have to pray that you find just the perfect person, really, because there's a wide range out there, as you all probably know and have found out.
Yeah. And what you described earlier about finding what the right agency or the right people, I think that lines up with the distinctions that are being made right now with services that only try to fix people, as opposed to neuro-affirming services, which recognize that we all have different neurologies, we all emote differently, we all communicate differently, and it's not helpful to say, here is what we need to fit you into to fix you. This seems to be so especially crucial for empaths, to be recognized for who they are.
Oh, totally. Because if a diagnostician misses this, it's a huge piece to miss, because you're not treating the basic issue, which is you're an empath, you're sensitive, you're overwhelmed by the world, you're absorbing all of this from the world, and you don't know how to process that. And so you want to give people behavioral skills that they can do, that they can practice, and gain some kind of mastery with, so they can see they're not just victims of the world's intensity. That you can do something when you're feeling overwhelmed. You're not just, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed. You want to say, all right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take myself to a quiet place. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to, put this on pause, whatever's in my mind that's going around and around, which can be overwhelming, and just get myself back to center again. So you develop this inner dialogue, and you get used to doing certain things where you're trained. You train yourself, and the parents train the child. This is what you do when you're overwhelmed. No big deal. It's not like a huge thing, but it's like, this is a skill. How are you doing with it? How does it feel? And so you have dialogue with the child, or you have dialogue with the adult. How's it working? Not working? Okay, let's find something else. So it's just a matter of teaching and keeping an open heart, finding out what resonates with the child or the adult. Because again, I keep saying this, each person is different. What resonates for me might not resonate for you. You might not like the desert. It might scare you or something, or it might be too raw and open. I don't know, but it could be anything.
Yeah, I don't like javelinas.
Yeah, I was going to say, Barry, I know what I'm not going to be for Halloween next year with Barry is a javelina. I don't want to.
I just want to say that I've spoken to so many people. I'm like a javelina advocate. That's They can be the sweetest, most loving creatures as long as you don't try and feed them or get in their way or have them, think it's a dangerous situation. They're very sweet and loving, and they could come visit you and So I had very positive experiences with them, but they are wild creatures and they're different. But that's why I chose the javelina, because they were different.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
maybe they process the world differently.
I can relate. I've been referred to as a wild boar, but it's spelled Boor.
Very nice.
Judith, as you speak, different terms are entering my mind that come out of the neurodivergent community. So when you say you need to learn how to say no, that's self-advocacy, right?
Right.
You need to know how to deal with different situations and how you might respond. And that is self-awareness.
Right.
Right. These are such crucial foundations that empaths really need to acquire with the support of others and as they grow developmentally.
Right. Exactly. And to just try things out and be patient and just little by little, not everything at once, tiny baby steps, not overwhelming, no rushing, take it easy, have some fun doing it.
Yeah.
This is fun. This is like, how do I regulate the world? How do I be in the world? And this is, a great background for children who are just learning to do that. So as adults, they don't have to reinvent the wheel, which was like so many of us had to do. But that's okay if you're an adult and you're learning at whatever age. Just be grateful that you have the opportunity to learn and that this is coming on your path and that you can take advantage of these techniques, and know there are so many of us out there, who have found these techniques useful, and it makes life so much better because you have a kind of mastery, or at least just know what to do in situations. Just know, I'm about to go down a bad road here. I'm so overwhelmed. I just have to get out of it. That's all. I'll figure out how to handle it later, but just don't say anything. Just don't blurt anything out, and just take care of myself. Self-care is a magical word. It's okay to feel overwhelmed by the world. Look at this world. It's overwhelming. My God. It's like, and I would suggest not listening to the news for lengthy periods of time because it's bad so far.
Oh, and I will add to that, scrolling on social media. Ironically, a lot of people use this as a palliative. When they're feeling overwhelmed, they go right to the phone, scroll social media. But what you're being inundated with is suffering, horrific news, terrible consequences for this person or that group of people. And then you absorb that, and that it just pushes you down even further. And I think probably one of the challenges that folks on the spectrum will have is, in some cases, depending on is interoception or proprioception, one of the words, where you can't decide, like, I don't feel well, but you can't specifically say, oh, it is my stomach, and it actually feels more upset and agitated than it does nauseated, right? Like you can't.
Interoception, yes.
Thank you. Okay, so interoception. Proprio
Yes.
is where you are in space.
Yeah.
So interoception could potentially be something that parents want to watch out for as well with their kiddos, because sometimes it's really hard to do some kind of self-assessment and say, that's why I'm feeling overwhelmed, right? Or
yeah, you can, but you could kind of do a little mini inventory of what could cause overwhelm in the child's life. And if they're looking at their computer all the time, if they're looking at the news, that's a good culprit. You want to educate the child that the world is going through a hard time, and you can look at it. I mean, I guess it depends how old the child is, but you want to have a life. You want to live a life in the current moment, and not think about the news or what's going on 3,000 miles away. You want to be in the now. You want to enjoy your life as a child. You want to have a beautiful childhood, and you want to grow up and feel good and be happy. And you can do that even in the midst of what's happening in our world. And it's very important to do that, as that's the goal, is to feel happy, to look at life as a challenge, and you could, enjoy life. And there are challenges, of course, but there are also periods of grace. I just look out my window here and I see the sunlight, and the birds flying and the trees and just anywhere. Just look out your window. Even if you live in a city that's, has big buildings, you could always find that little flower in the sidewalk, that you could think is beautiful. So that's very important. That the point of all this, what we're talking about, is to lead a happy life, and to focus on that, and let yourself have permission to do that.
Your point is so important that ultimately we can choose the lens that we look through, and that's so essential. So I'd love to kind of conclude with a wonderful quote that comes from you. And I did want to say that, of course, we will include links on the webpage for this episode for many of the resources you mentioned for your books and everything else, since you referred to them, so people can get to that. But a quote that I loved, you said, "I believe that sensitive children will save our world." Tell us more.
That's right. I do. And that's why I wrote The Highly Sensitive Rabbit, because these children are going to inherit the earth, and we're going to go on and travel on our journeys, whatever they may be. But these children are growing up. They're 8, 9, 10, 16, 21. There they are, with the earth. And they are the proper stewards of the earth because they have the connection to the earth, and they don't debate whether or not there's climate change. They don't debate whether or not it's a good thing to take care of our animals, and they don't debate that because it's not an issue for them. And so they're the perfect people to be in leadership roles. And the way to do that is to make sure they're going to be in good shape. And that's why I wrote The Highly Sensitive Rabbit, and to give them tools so that when they get older, they won't have as many blocks. They'll be able to move forward more quickly with what they really want. And they'll know how to handle the challenges. And so that's what I mean by sensitive children will inherit the earth, because they literally will.
With the strengths that they bring to all of us. Yes.
That's
important.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
And I think such an important part of that happy life, healthy life, is the self-esteem. It gets very tricky territory when you are feeling overwhelmed by things that nobody else seems to be overwhelmed by. And then you think, now you're not just having to process the things that you're perceiving, but you're also processing the emotion of, oh, why am I different? Why am I the broken toy? Which becomes a very dangerous, snowball effect as far as self-esteem is concerned.
It is, and it's not true. That's not a true statement. I'm a broken toy,
right?
Or broken in any way. That's not true. So you must know that, and that's why I wanted to talk about the shame that others inflict on anyone who's different, basically. If they're considered different, they have a hard time with that. And you could see that acted out on the world stage too. Anyone different than me, I'm suspicious of. So it's the same thing, but in a different context. And you just want to not come down on yourself, not continue to tell yourself these stories that aren't true. It is not true that you are broken. All right. And I really want to get that across to everybody. And if you still can't stop that, you might need some help in reprogramming your brain, in terms of seeing the actual truth. Say to yourself, I'm a beautiful person and I handle things in my own way. Might not be I'm so used to doing it differently than other people, because I've had so many years on this earth that it's just, I expect it. And it's
absolutely.
So we're not just changing the lens that we look at highly sensitive children and people, but we want these individuals to change the lens that they look at themselves through.
Yes, most important. Yes, change the lens. So it's kindness, and it's empathy, and it's adventure, and it's how can I be my most real, authentic self? How can I enjoy this time on earth that I have?
Yes. Well, Judith, this has been absolutely wonderful. I've learned a lot. And I know that our listeners will be doing their quiet applause as they listen, because you've provided a very important alternative lens to the world that sometimes tends to be too compartmentalized clinically and too pathologizing. This is a whole different way of looking at the children and the adults that we all share our lives with. So important.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you.
You are so welcome. This has been a great interview. Thank you both.
All right.
Thank you. I'm going to go order the book.
Yay!